What's up, Danny?
Hey, what's going on? Good to see you.
Good to see you. Indeed.
Nice to be here.
Absolutely. I appreciate you coming through and joining me for this Bridge Builder conversation.
I'm excited to be here.
Hey, it's going to be a good one.
Yeah.
That's what I believe. Indeed. But just real quick to, I guess, level set. These conversations are all about learning across difference. It's all about creating that safe space for us to be authentic in that, even to, how would I say, show some ignorance. Speak to myself where like, I don't understand. Help me understand this. So obviously we have a relationship as we serve within the community together on a board, as well as, my wife and things of that nature. So I'm looking forward to getting to know you, Daniel. Again, I don't introduce you with your job title and who you work for very intentionally, because I believe who you are speaks in a lot of ways to how you lead within the community. So let's start there. Tell me about yourself.
Tell you a little bit about me. Well, I've called Charlotte home for a really long time, but I was born in Acapulco, Mexico, which is a really nice beach town in southern Mexico. It's beautiful, and been back, many times. And every time I go, I'm like, why did my parents leave this beautiful paradise? But like many families in Mexico and many parts of the world, they left because they wanted a better future for themselves and particularly for their kids. So when I was 3 years old, they moved to Southern California, where we had lots of family. My grandfather was there, and aunts and uncles. And I was there till I was about 12. And then we got on a plane and went to a place I'd never heard before. State that I have never heard before, in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I was in middle school, and we moved, well, it wasn't even Charlotte, we moved to Cabarrus County, Midland, North Carolina to be precise. And I was in middle school. I went to school, Cabarrus County, and grew up here, and went to college here. And at college is really where I discovered my passion for giving back, where I put a lot of things together that I saw growing up in a very small rural community where there weren't very many people that looked like me. And so that sort of discovery in college really led me to the work that I do today, which is work in the nonprofit sector. And I work specifically in the area of immigration, but throughout my career, I've worked in different areas. And because I've called Charlotte home for so long, and this is my community, I try to volunteer and give in many other spaces beyond just immigration. But that's where my focus is, and it's a little bit about me. I have 2 younger brothers, and huge extended family here in North Carolina and California, and many of those came here to this growing city to find jobs. So my parents worked in the manufacturing construction area, and were able to buy their first house and give their kids some opportunities.
Oh, sweet. You gave me the entire. We're gonna rewind and break down.
Let's do it. I know I tend to talk really fast.
No, it's good. That's good. So from Mexico to SoCal, and you were there how long?
For about 10 years, 8 to 10 years. Yeah. So I went to did elementary school there.
Okay.
I remember beautiful weather, lots of family, and dual language. I did both English and Spanish in terms of schooling. It was a shock here to come here, and one of the first things I heard was another kid tell me that this is America and we speak English here.
Wow.
Yeah.
I knew you were gonna say that.
Yeah, it's true.
Good job, Charlotte. No, that's what is it? I'm thinking about, like, do you still have family in Mexico?
Yes, I still have lots of family in Mexico, and one of the things that I've always tried to do is try to stay as connected as I can to my roots and my heritage and everything that represents. And I've been fortunate enough and lucky enough that I'm able to go back and come back and go back and come back. Like grew up with many friends who didn't have that ability. Certainly something I have not taken for granted.
It's dope when I think about, how would I say, for the Black or African American community in so many ways being so distant from what is your homeland, where are your people from and your family from. And as I talk to individuals like yourself who are not too far removed from immigrating to America, I always think about, man, what might it be like? You know what I mean? And typically it's always a thing of you're always intentional about remaining connected, which I value as well, because I think in a lot of ways, and again, I can't stereotype, or I'll speak for myself, and even my Native American roots here, is the idea of how much energy do I put behind actually learning, you know what I mean? And in some ways I chalk it up to being complacent. It's like,
It's easy. It's easy to just go with what's here. And certainly I've embraced this country's history and culture, as well as this local communities. I'm a proud Charlottean in many ways, but it also takes intentionality to look back, to try to find where you come from, what that means. And it took me a long time to get there, but college, I think for me, was the place where I had the opportunity to explore the history and the culture of my people, where I came from, and just continue to help me, value that has a different lens, has a different experience.
Sure.
And it helped me understand, where other folks may come from in terms of their own experience.
Got you. And you say it took until college. So how did you navigate the dynamics of, again, your parents immigrating to America, you being different? How did you navigate that internally for yourself, whether it's in SoCal or coming here to North Carolina?
I think I have more sort of memories of being older, of course. I think that informs me a little bit more. But at home, it was only Spanish. It was only television, music, everything that we heard was very much centered around that. So from that perspective, I felt really connected. Okay. But one of the things that I wasn't really aware of and I didn't get a chance to learn was about our history, our history as Latin Americans or as Mexican, our writers, our ways that our civilizations have been here for a really, really long time and have contributed, right, to humanity. Just how important the history and the culture of my place and where I was born is. Those things I didn't get a chance to really delve into. One, because my parents, taught me what they could, but they also they didn't finish high school or go to college, and it was something that I was the first person in my family to go to college and to navigate that, and there it was an opportunity for me to learn and to read and to have access to things that growing up I really didn't have access to, particularly going to public school where those weren't the kinds of books or stories that we were hearing.
No, I hear that. And I guess as I ask that, I'm thinking about other bridge builder conversations I've had whether it's being a Vietnamese immigrant or just being Italian growing up in New York. And there was this dynamic of, how would I say, coming into oneself and having periods of actually devaluing who they were, whether it was the language. Is like, to your point, it's like, yeah, son, forget Italian, speak English, you know what I mean? Or the dynamic of, wanting to have blonde hair, blue eyes, you know what I mean? And that's far from who, your people are or your family possesses. So I guess for you, did you ever have any times like that growing up where you struggled with really loving yourself pretty much at the core and valuing?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I was lucky in the sense that I had a family that was very much not shying away from that, and so that helped me. But in school, yeah, there were times where like, did I want my parents to pack my lunch because I didn't want, my schoolmates to see what we were eating because it was so different. And now looking back, I'm like, it's so much better than whatever they were giving us in the cafeteria. But you have those times for sure growing up. But I found that to be particularly true, I think, growing up, not around my race or my ethnicity or my language, which there was some of that. But I think for the most part, I was able, even very young, to be proud of that. And I remember replying to this person and saying the United States doesn't have an official language. I can speak whatever language I want here. And so that to me, from the very beginning, I've always been pretty cognizant of that. I'm proud of my cultural heritage. I think where it comes to, for me, was a lot around my sexuality and like being a gay, like first generation immigrant in a very traditional sort of Mexican Catholic household. That was probably a place where I had struggled. And I think again in college where I really was able to learn more about that and to come into myself in those terms. And and that I think a lot of times had some doubts about who I was from that sense or who I was supposed to be. And that I think was more of a struggle than necessarily my heritage or my culture. There were times here and there, but for the most part, I was always really proud of that and always wanted to hold on to that. And that's not something that I saw with everyone. I had friends who were very much trying to assimilate rather than be included or be integrated into the work. And there are reasons why people do that. And in a lot of cases, it's unfortunate that as a society, we want people to do that, or we force people to do that, sometimes unconsciously by the ways that we treat them or the kinds of things that we say.
Gotcha. No, that's interesting. So as you talk about your struggles, which very much sound, I'm sure it's not exclusive, but internally when it comes to your sexuality within your home, and the, I guess, Roman Catholic upbringing, I think about, I guess, how would I put this? How does that impact, or how did it impact you having to grapple in that way with, I would say, within your own bubble of family? How did you maneuver through that? How did you journey through that period?
Yeah, a lot of it was just nodding or smiling when folks ask you. You're growing up, they're asking if you have a girlfriend or how many girlfriends do you have, those kinds of things, and sort of just like brushing it off or not trying to address things head on. Family in general, I think, I came to find out later on, the most everyone was pretty much aware of it, suspected it. It wasn't a huge shock or a surprise to them. So that ended up working out. But I think too, I grew up in a very small rural town in a school that had ride your tractor to school day type of thing. And it was very,
Did you have a tractor then?
I did not have a tractor, unfortunately, that I could ride.
They didn't have
to
a
school.
rent a tractor?
No, but people brought there was one day a year where people would bring and ride their tractors to school.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
No.
In school, I think it was a little bit more of navigating and sort of trying to make sure that wasn't something that came up, and avoiding it as possible, those kinds of things. But I think with family, it was more just sort of not confronting things head on, brushing things off. And at the end of the day, when I came out to my family, everyone was very, very, very much accepting of it, which was for me a pleasant surprise that I wasn't sure how my family would react. So I've been very lucky, but that hasn't been the stories for many of my friends who come from very similar backgrounds, who were disowned, were kicked out, were not able to sort of be part of their families. And that's been something that I've kept in mind as I think about how lucky I have been and what I can do to help those kinds of mothers and fathers who are having these kinds of of conversations and things in their families so that they can better address them and hopefully kids can have better outcomes like the ones that I did and not like the ones that some of my friends did where they were ostracized or kicked out or excluded from their families for that.
Got you. No, this is good and kind of, I guess, transition in our conversation and talking about in the many ways you lead within the community, whether it's Charlotte Pride or whether it's Welcoming America.
Yes.
So definitely, and I'll say this even in the conversation, I think I mentioned it even early when it comes to ignorances. Being, and it's not just because it's what I'm speaking about myself, being a Black male from the inner city, raised in a Christian household, there's a lot of ignorances I have and just not knowing when it comes to the LGBTQ plus community and those dynamics. I feel like in my latter, I guess 15 years, I've been able to learn a good bit, and it has a lot to do with friends I've made who I'm more proximate to and being able to create meaningful relationships where there's safety, where, hey, I can ask you this, help me understand, you know what I mean? So again, I'm excited about being able to dive into that dynamic with you, but definitely want to also, I guess, transition and talk about and again, I can think about how it might, but I want to hear from you, how you grew up, the family dynamics, where you're from, play into the organizations you now take part in leading.
Yeah, absolutely. So my day-to-day job is with a national organization called Welcoming America. And Welcoming America works to help local communities be more welcoming for everyone, particularly immigrants and refugees, making sure that they're able to participate in the cultural, economic, and in every aspect of life at the local level. And so I'm very lucky to work in an organization that every day works to make local communities all over this country more welcoming and inclusive for newcomers. At the same time, it's an organization that recognizes that immigration is just one aspect of someone's life and that there are so many intersectionalities.
Sure.
Immigration status can intersect with racial status as well. When we think about what's happening in immigration and some of the discrimination that's happening, is very much centered around race and this treatment that we're seeing from certain groups that are coming to the United States versus others. And that treatment, I think, reflects that. And so Welcoming America recognizes the importance of intersectionality. When we think about the queer community as well, when folks are fleeing places because they can literally be killed for who they are in different countries, like immigration transcends so many different issue areas, and Welcoming America is trying to make sure that folks are having those conversations. In particular, and something that's really important for this conversation around bridge building is that Welcoming America was started in Tennessee because there was a huge growing population, particularly of Latino immigrants and other refugees from other countries who were coming for jobs. In places like Charlotte, in Nashville, and Austin, and so many other cities across the South that were growing in the late 90s, early 2000s. And there was a lot of folks who had been in these communities for a really long time, and all of a sudden we're seeing these newcomers, these immigrants, these refugees pop up into their communities, and they were afraid. They didn't know who these people were, what religion they practiced, what language they spoke, and certainly wanted to figure out ways to exclude them in many cases. And so there were these bills, there were English-only bills that were being passing all over the South, where they wanted to say that English was the only language that they wanted to.
How long ago was that?
This was in 2000s, early 2000s, 2006, 2007.
So like it wasn't too long ago.
Yeah, it was not. It was not very
like
long
okay.
ago. It was very long, not long ago, and it was the same. Like these were people like me, my family, who were coming. Okay. I came in 1998 to Charlotte. Okay. So these were the same families that we're talking about, people who built these skyscrapers that you see in Charlotte and all over these cities in the South and in the Midwest. And so Welcoming America was established to combat some of the fear that long-term residents had about newcomers. And so it started with dialogues between newcomers and long-term residents to try to create those bridges, to really help long-term residents understand that these newcomers wanted the same things that they did. They wanted a safe community, they wanted jobs, they wanted to provide for their family, and they wanted a better future for their kids. And maybe they had a different religion, maybe they had a different language, maybe they ate different food. But at the end of the day, when you got down to the core of why they were in these communities and why so many had risked their lives or abandoned everyone that they knew to come to a new community, to come to a new city that they never heard of, a place that they never even knew existed like I did when I was 12. They just really wanted a better life for themselves. And in communities that have opened up their arms and given them that opportunity, we've seen the contributions and how folks want to stay and want to contribute and want to give back. And I have lots of family that are here that are contributing, that are giving back, that are proud of Charlotte and the work that the city has done. And so that's the work of Welcoming America. We work with local governments, we work with nonprofit organizations to give them the tools and the resources that they need to talk about this work, to have effective narrative, to have effective programs at the local level, but also to have some really meaningful policy change at the local level.
Gotcha. And
why it's important to do that work. So that's my work with Welcoming America. And then throughout the years, I volunteered in a number of different organizations. You and I volunteered.
You move too fast. You move too fast. So, Welcoming America, and as you describe it, again, I love it. The idea, and why do I love it? I hear understanding as well as I hear grace in there, and from the standpoint of there's ignorance. You know what I mean? And how can we extend opportunities, create opportunities, programs, whatever it is to help educate those who are fearful. And how would I say, coming from you know what I mean? It's like, you're not the problem. You know what I mean? So to even think about that, I feel like there's so much humility in that, and grace, and again, just understanding, because I think a lot of times what tends to divide us is just a lack of understanding.
It is.
You don't know.
It is. When you don't know what you don't know.
Exactly.
And we got to meet people where they are. And it's absolutely true. This week, Welcoming America is celebrating its 10th Welcoming Week, which is a campaign that we do every year in September to create events that uplift and really showcase why diversity is so important to local communities. And it started with a handful of cities back in 2012. And now we are hosting events. Our members and our partners are hosting events in Canada, in Australia, in New Zealand, the UK, all over the world. Thousands of events happening. And Charlotte is one of those cities that has hosted many events during Welcoming Week. And we're seeing it in Crete, Nebraska, and in San Francisco, and everywhere in between. And so it's an important thing to recognize that this work not only requires a lot of deep policy work, but also there's an opportunity for us to celebrate diversity. It's important.
That is dope. So I always like to, and why we start off with origin story is, again, because it can speak in so many ways to why you actually do what you do. But I like to ask the question, like, what of your journey do you believe led you to do this specific work with Welcoming America? I have my example in the back of my brain, but I'll let you speak.
So, I mean, I will say it even goes before Welcoming America. So I started my nonprofit career at the Latin American Coalition here in Charlotte, which is the largest Latino organization here in the city. And I started their started doing some immigrant rights work for them. But all of it was because I remember many times having to help my mom and my parents with things like doctor's appointments or interpreting or translating for them. Thinking about how hard it was for me to navigate going to college. If it wasn't for this one history teacher that I had who took me under her wing and gave me everything I needed to apply for FAFSA and to get applications and all that stuff, my parents didn't know how to do any of that. And so for me, it was, how can we help not only these families now, but create a system and an infrastructure that doesn't rely on a 12, 13, 14-year-old kid to interpret their doctor's appointments for their parents, for example. Sure. Yeah.
So the example I had in the back of my mind, you already gave, is when I guess the student said, "We speak English."
Oh,
here.
yeah.
And even in your response to him is the level of educating. In case you didn't know, you know what I mean? So with what I hear you doing with Welcome America, it very much falls in that same line in my mind. So no, that's
absolutely
cool.
That's definitely part of it. Yeah.
That's cool. So how about, again, Charlotte Pride is one of the other things you're part of?
Charlotte Pride is another organization. As I mentioned, coming out to my family was something that I wasn't sure how it was going to happen. How were they going to take it? It went really well. I have a very supportive family. I've been very lucky. And the reality is that Charlotte, like many cities in the South and the Midwest, has grown. And the queer community is not just African Americans, and it's not just white Americans. It's immigrants from all over the world, and a lot of times organizations haven't kept up with that kind of growth and given that. And so for me, it's important that visibility and that I'm visible in those spaces as well, because it opens up opportunities for us to talk about the specific needs that the Latinx community has when it comes to the sort of the intersection of their queerness and their culture. And so for me, it was about making sure that I gave my time to an organization that is dedicated to increasing visibility here in Charlotte for our community, and continue to do so, but also understood that visibility was something that was needed not just for cis gay men, but for communities of color, trans community, and making sure that those experiences were being highlighted. And so my passion around Charlotte Pride has been, how do we make sure that both Charlotte Pride as an organization diversifies and understands that this community is much broader and much diverse than it has traditionally thought of, and also how do we make sure that Charlotte Pride is at those tables talking about issues that are important. A lot of times we get pigeonholed into only these items are important to, and this happens to the Latino community, are only important to queer folks. But no, when I was in Charlotte Pride, we participated in the census. It's important for us to be part of the census. Sure. We're talking about transportation or housing, those issues that a lot of times folks don't think of bringing us to the table. And for me, every organization that I worked in, it's how do we make sure that we are part of those conversations that are happening about the future of our community.
Sure.
And it's not just siloed to this particular area. Oh, we're going to talk about immigration, so we're going to bring the Latino community in. No, we need to, if we're going to talk about schools, if we're going to talk about transportation, if we're going to talk about housing, if we're going to talk about anything that's happening in the city, you should have us there as well. You should have us at the table, because we are also here. We are, again, we're not just one aspect of one thing, but we are a whole person, and that means that we also have interests in many areas, and things impact us in many different ways as well. So my work with Charlotte Pride has been on helping the organization grow its visibility and its impact, its programming, and I'm just very, very proud of our last Charlotte Pride that happened in August. We had 275,000 people throughout the weekend, the largest ever, and just thinking about that from when I started to now, I mean, the growth has just been tremendous, and it's been really rewarding to see.
It's a lot of people. Is Charlotte Pride, is that the largest event from people coming into Charlotte?
Yeah. Okay. We are definitely the largest Pride event, and probably the largest festival that's happened, because we were bringing so many folks out, and just only seeing the growth continue, and it's great. And I would say that the work here continues in our sort of queer spaces because of what's happening with trans kids in particular, and the legislations of folks trying to attack our trans community, our trans kids in particular. And so like this issue is very salient and continues to be. And a lot of times people think of Charlotte Pride and festivals as a celebration, and we've come a long way as a community, and there's lots to celebrate. But in my mind, the work that Charlotte Pride does, and many other organizations like Charlotte Pride, is also making sure that we don't forget why we continue to exist, because they are, like I mentioned, people in other parts of the world and even here in the United States, people are being murdered, both state sanctioned, but also by being who they are, being attacked. Charlotte has the second highest rate of Black trans women that are murdered in the country. I mean, these are the reasons why organizations like us exist, to create that visibility, to help folks know that they're not alone, but also to shine a light on some of the challenges that exist in these communities, and that it's still happening.
You're so calm and collective as you're spewing all this information, data, and all that jazz out. No, that's dope, and I think it's a great time to transition into. I invited DJ Fannie Mae to join us, so let's go ahead and have her join us real quick.
Yes, please.
Greetings.
Anyway, appreciate you joining us.
Thank you for having me.
As I understand it, y'all have crossed paths already.
We have.
Indeed. You know, because you're, what do you do with this football club?
Yeah, I'm the official DJ for the Charlotte FC. So, shout out to us and our inaugural season, ups and downs, but shout out to them.
Go Charlotte FC, my favorite soccer team.
Indeed. And you were crowned at a match?
Yeah, so Charlotte FC has been a great partner, and so we had Charlotte Pride and Charlotte FC on the Pride Night, and they crowned someone every game, and so my board and our staff at Charlotte Pride know how much I love soccer and the Charlotte FC club, so I got able to do that. And
got crowned and stood up and held up the scarf. Yeah,
it's fun. Great music.
Well, thank you.
Please tell me more. What was the music like?
It was very upbeat, which is great.
So I've never been to a soccer match in person. And should we refer to it as football?
I mean, if we want to confuse folks, we should do it. Yeah, let's just say football.
All right. So I've never been to a match in person. I've watched some on television, and let's just say the energy is different in a football match than NFL. And like in a good way, it's like, people are wide open, standing up for the entire match.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Actually doing the wave and stuff. Like, it's that type of engagement.
Right.
Like, I remember it was one match, I think I counted, they did the wave like 6 times in a row. And I'm like, are you guys not tired yet? Like, it was just like, ah!
Gotcha.
And you watch around the whole stadium thinking, ah! Like, I'm like, oh my God. Well, have fun, guys. I'm glad you're enjoying yourself. I enjoy watching it, trying to they're distracting me from watching the match, but it's good. The energy is definitely different. I think I've been to all types of sporting events, but so I say, people ask me how, do I love it? Look, I didn't know I was a soccer fan until this year, and I absolutely love it.
It's the world's sport.
It is.
It brings so many people from so many different backgrounds together.
And that's why I love it, man. Just because I have a chance to just play and, capture the energy of all types of people in such a big arena. And that's just beautiful to have everybody just having a good time, and being able to curate the music for that is such a blessing. So, yeah.
It's dope. And obviously you're more than just a DJ for the football club. You're a musician, songwriter. I'll let you tell your own story.
Philanthropist,
help us understand.
Author, CEO of a $1 billion company. I'm into a lot of things, So, but yeah, I'm an artist through and through. So anything that allows me to express myself and to be my authentic self is what I do, in just different capacities. So whether it's visual, like music, or, even sleeping is art to me. So I do that quite often as I can. So yeah.
No, for that. No, that's dope. So let me see. As I was talking to Daniel about how he's leading in the community, Welcoming America, one facet, Charlotte Pride being another. And I was explaining to him that, and I probably didn't finish explaining fully just how the context in which I grew up as a Black man, inner city, within a Christian household when it comes to the queer community. There are certain unstated rules, you know what I mean? It's like, and actually when I think about it, it's like, yeah, they can stay over there, we stay over here. And it's like, again, unspoken rules. Like, why exactly? And as I talk about ignorance, and this is, honestly, I feel like this is one of those bridge builder conversations where I know I have a lot of ignorance when it comes to the queer community. A lot I don't understand, a lot that maybe I've fallen into, yeah, this is just what we do, you know what I mean? But you really don't understand. And definitely as a bridge builder, it's like, yo, building bridges across across difference is very important for me to understand, to be able to deepen my level of understanding, thus being able to be empathetic and understand, support. And as I put it, it's like you can't really truly support somebody until you truly value and care for someone. And when you value and care for them, it's no longer a task to be done. It's like, it's the outflow of, no, yo, I care for Fannie, I care for Daniel, therefore why would I not? In having this conversation with you, I'm interested in just what are the challenges for you individually, as well as the opportunities when it comes to how you lead, the community you belong to, as well as obviously what are the opportunities if more bridges were created, we were made more culturally incompetent when it comes to the queer community. So let's start with the challenges. What are the challenges? You've spoken of some already. What is the challenge that you had to face being a Black woman as part of the queer community?
You know what? I don't know, to be honest. I can't necessarily say, because before all else, I'm still a child of God and I'm favored. Mm-hmm. So regardless of what comes after that, that's what covers me. I'm covered. I'm blessed. Mm-hmm. In every room that I'm supposed to be in and everything I'm supposed to do, I do. And if I'm, if I get a chance, I'm gonna ruffle their feathers and go from there. But I can't necessarily say that I've faced a lot of intentional challenges. And a lot of times if, tell Charlotte Pride to holler at me, they've never, I think I may have did like a virtual thing for them, but they've never did. And I'm such a, I'm not necessarily, I'm me. Why wouldn't you hire me for anything Charlotte Pride, But I'm just saying, so it's just things like that. And I think it's just awareness. Sometimes I don't think it's always setbacks for me personally. Because I still am I'm still cool, overall. The biggest opposition that you would face is from the religious community at times. Okay. I think that's probably the biggest thing, being that I'm a church kid and raised in the church, and that my life, if you look at where I come from and those who have said they love me all my life, I'm not what they thought I would be. Mm-hmm. And so, generally out in this world and with people, because I believe that my life has been honored because I have been myself. I don't lead with me being a queer woman. I don't lead with that. I am, I guess it's quite obvious at times, but that's not my sole identity. And so that is who I love, that's who I sleep with, that is who I choose to partner with, is another woman. But that's my business as well. And so when I step into these arenas as a professional, you can't deny my talent and my gift. And that has been more of what people have been attracted to, more so than my sexuality. Now what I say is maybe has helped. Maybe. It's niche now. I'm a queer. Look at me. Let's see. I look cool. You look great. You're snazzy. Oh my God. And you're queer. Let's hire her. The diversity inclusion ends with her. It could very well be that. But am I always aware of that? No.
So I'm even asking in that answer, to me, it sounds like there's a challenge and there's a rub there. And even as you speak about your, again, identity, and I'm who I am before I even get here. Do you feel, as you're talking about it being niche, do you feel as if people see who you are, or do they see now what you represent, this niche? Does that make sense?
I don't know. I can't always say. Because it is, but I have kept my private life private for many years. Mm-hmm. I am in a serious relationship now that I do, express my love for her very openly. But other than that, you could assume what you want about my life for a lot of times because I kept that to myself. Mm-hmm. Now, if there's ever a reason for me to stand up for my people and stand up for those who we all identify as ourselves, or if I'm out and I see something going on, then I'm always going to stand in that gap. Mm-hmm. Because not only about my sexuality, we're all people. And that's what at the end of the day always matters to me. Whether it's my race. I mean, I fit into a lot of, so I'm black, woman, and queer. So I already fit into those.
Yeah.
So when I do, and being now that I have, I guess, accelerated and, have a level of people knowing me, it is more so if I get the chance to stand up, then I will. And recently I did. And I looked, it was a little moment at a spot, and I didn't feel like we were being treated properly. And I kind of got into it with the security guards a little bit. But people have said they appreciate it for me for standing up, and I didn't look at it as standing up. I look at it as you're interrupting our freedom. It wasn't like, oh, I got to go say I'm not Captain Save-A-Ho. That wasn't it. It was more so you're interrupting our right to be free. And who are you to say that we can't? And so, I got bucked. So I think, I'm just going to always stand in those gaps. And I don't think it's always knowingly. It's just I react. And humanity and us being treated equally, it's just the way it should be.
Sure. How about you, Dae?
I think a lot of our challenges have been nuanced now. I think that because of here in America, of course, I think that when we think about challenges, of course, it's localized too, and it's different in different places. I've had an opportunity to talk and to travel to different places around the world that are organizing pride events. I remember one time there was this organizer from a country that's very repressive, and in their village they got 10 people to attend their event, and that was a huge accomplishment, right? And so they're seeing discrimination in a very clear and systemized way. But in the United States, I would say in some ways a lot of it is very nuanced, and a lot of times you're not sure if they're trying to tick a box and have you just for representation. That is a challenge. Because then what agency will you have to actually affect change if they're putting you on a board or on a panel to say something, right? Like that is a challenge, right? Tokenism happens, a lot of unconscious bias that we're seeing, and that has real impact on folks' ability to secure a job or to be who they are. I think those are some of the challenges that we're seeing. And then there is a nuanced way of talking about issues in the queer community that has changed and that has been more sophisticated. And a lot of it now is they're moving away necessarily from the religion, and they're really talking about, I was just on a panel with the Levine Museum not too long ago where one of the professors was talking about how their narrative is really about the children now. And saving children versus it being a sinful thing or being religious based, because that no longer has as much sway as it did in the past. And so like there are a lot of places where folks who don't want us to exist.
So we're pushing such an agenda.
Yeah.
When you say saving the children, what are you speaking?
Well, in particular, for example, for trans kids, right? And some kids who aren't able to change their names or those kinds of things. There is a lot of narrative, right, around this idea that we're just here to corrupt children, for example, right? And that's really what they want. They want to save the kids. It's not really a religious thing. It's not really anything else other than that, right? And it's become nuanced.
But on the back end, it is rooted in religion.
Oh, it is, of course.
Absolutely.
Of course. Absolutely.
Especially in the South. I mean, but like you said, that's what I'm saying. It's like the gay agenda in which they speak of as if, you see two same-sex people walking down and the street, and it's like, oh, that's going to turn my child gay. I can even think about a time in my life growing up, and there was a woman, she played college basketball, and she was like a camp counselor, and she was cool, like, and I guess, of course, you're attracted to certain people and not in any way, but you just kind of, you vibe with people at all ages, And I remember my parents kind of like being like, kind of stay away from her. And it was mainly but I'm a child. I don't know what her sexuality is. I don't know that. And I think that the adult ignorances they're trying to place on children earlier. Right. And that's where I guess it's more of a problem than anything because children don't know. Yeah. Children don't even know necessarily. They know that, okay, I have a friend that's black, but we love the same thing. We love to play with Legos. That's their common thing.
That's interesting, yeah.
It's not their color that divides them.
Sure.
It's what what they like that draws them together. That's what that's like the childlike just thing. Even the other day I was watching, it was a mom. She said she recently took her sons down to Disney. You know, the new Little Mermaid trailer came out, and it's all, hoopla about, her being a black woman. There's no reputations for white gingers. And it's like, well, black gingers exist. Whole other conversation. But she took her children down, her boys, down to Disney, and they were attracted to the mermaid. They loved her. They were like, oh, that's my favorite. Came back, and they watched the trailer of the new mermaid. Her son she said, what did you think of it? He was like, where are all of her friends? He didn't even recognize her color. He said, where are her friends? He was more concerned about the other people in the sea rather than what she saw. So you understand that just shows you the biases that we carry are because life teaches us these biases. And so that's what I think with a lot of everything that we see now. Like I said, tokenism, or I'm putting this because I'm this way. And it's just like, I don't want to affect your kids any way but to be an amazing person. I don't want to affect anybody on this world, but to live and love and light. You're never going to see me. I mean, you may see me like smooch my girl, but you're never going to see me past that. And like, it's as if people think that they still treat it as it's like something, I'm gonna touch you when you get it. Yeah. I'm gonna touch you in here. You now gay. The gay, it's rubbed off on you. And now, but it's not one of those things. And, even in my own family life, I've had to deal with that. Well, why do you still, talk to her when, God doesn't like it? And it's just like, how is that godly? And so there's a lot of things that I think that go beyond what we actually speak of, and we need to get to the root of everybody being self-reflective. And if we're in the South, so a lot of things are faith-based. So if you love God, like you say, you do what God are you really serving?
Gotcha.
It's always my question.
So this is interesting, and I'll ask I'll put it this way. I would say what I understand of the rub between the faith community and the queer community, the degree that I do understand, because I would say again, even some of what you mentioned, what? So I feel like I'm a very simple guy, and kind of what you've spoken to is like, if I know at the core, these are principles or characteristics of, what being godly looks like, whether it's love, whether it's forgiveness, grace, X, Y, Z. I try to boil it. I try to keep it simple, not too complicated.
Yeah.
And what I do observe very much in the same way you say is like, how do these things line up exactly? So I very much I sense that, and I'm always wondering is like, if I have a question to ask, it's always, and we can roll into the opportunity side of things, like, what would you, two-part question. How would you encourage, and you can root this in the faith community or just people's ignorance in general, how would you encourage someone like myself to various degrees that's ignorant to connect with the queer community in Bridgeville, and what are the opportunities that can come out of just connecting and, how would I say, getting to know people and building valuable relationships? Hopefully that question made sense.
I can share an example. So, I talked about earlier, I don't mention this as much as I don't lead with this at all either, but I would consider myself an atheist, right? And so like even this idea of religion dictating anything around my life is something that's very interesting, right? And at the same time, I will recognize that there are a lot of faith communities that have made significant inroads and have been very welcoming churches, and we have them here in Charlotte. And so one of my favorite things that I did while I was chair of Charlotte Pride was to lead our interfaith service that we have the Sunday before Pride Week starts. So on the Sunday before Pride Week starts, we bring together different faith communities into a service, and we do a service. Okay. And it's it's called interfaith Pride service. And It's one of my favorite things, because just seeing all of the different folks come together. And one year I was asked to speak, and it was at a Jewish temple. I mean, there was the first time we were doing that. And they had all of these religious leaders there from the community. And I mentioned, I said, you know, I someone who is not a believer, I want to be able to work with communities that we have a common goal. And if our common goal is to leave this world a better place for the people that come after us, for our kids and for their kids. If our goal is to live a more just and equitable world for people, whether or not, for me, I believe that there's a reward after I die or after my life ends, or that I go to eternity or not, like, to me, that doesn't matter, as long as we can agree that we want to leave this place a better place for people that come after us. And if we can part from that, then we can work together. And it doesn't matter what your religious or non-religious orientation is around that. Like, we have a common place to work together from. And religion has been used both to advance very, very amazing and great things, and it's also been used to some of the most heinous and destructive things that are committed. And so it's all about how it's being used and how people decide to really interpret and manipulate those kinds of things. And so for me, religion is very much a very positive thing, but it can also be very destructive depending on how folks choose to really live their faith and their beliefs. And are they working towards a better, more equitable future for everyone? Or are they trying to exclude people from what they believe is a space that they may have at the end of life? And I don't know. It's tough for me. But that's where I land on these things. But I do have to say that there are, here in Charlotte and across the world, institutions of faith that are opening, that are welcoming, and that have really utilized that space for love and for compassion.
So before we hear from you, the word welcoming, and what ticks in my brain automatically is this idea, which again, in a lot of ways, we can't void our conversation from the history of our country and how it informs how we move, how we have moved, even the implicit bias that we hold towards one another, and just that word welcoming. And how, again, if I take it back to how we move, is like left or right, this or that. Is so much of that, and that rhetoric does not allow for space for you maybe not to agree, but still be welcoming. You know what I mean? To not to, but still be loving. To not agree, but still, you get what I'm saying? So that is like a big, it's a big beef I have with, that I think causes us to demonize certain groups of people because we've been inundated with this thought of, if they don't, we can't. You know what I mean? Which to me, again, even on a spiritual level, is like, that don't line up exactly, you know what I mean? Because as far as I know, you know, the purpose of faith is not for those who agree, it's those who need, you know what I mean? Yeah. And that does not begin, there isn't a box for that, you know what I mean? There isn't a certain type of need. It's like, no, it's hope for everyone. So go for it.
Yeah, I think that for me, it is the fact that it's not always welcoming. You know, I've had to even come to grips with my own, like, you know, asking and posing those questions, even with those I've grown up in and where and how I've grown up. If I was an outsider and I heard this message, would that be able to get me into those doors, into that church? If I heard that message, would I love the God that you speak of? Mm-hmm. Would that attract me to the church? Would make me love Jesus? And in a lot of ways, as I've, you know, grown and gotten older, no. I can answer that and say no. It's not. If I was a random off the street and happened to go into the doors of that church, I'd probably walk right back out after an hour of being there because of the rhetoric and the way things are spoken of. I think the challenge lies in people have faith and belief because it's something that I feel like on a basic level, we all need something to believe in. You don't have to believe in God,
No.
but you believe in something. You know, that is a basic thing within us that we like. You have a child.
Sure.
Jump off of this table. I'll catch you is belief. Now, I believe in my daddy is going to catch me every time. So I'm going to jump on this table. I ain't got to look no more. I know he's going to catch me. Sure. And so that is the foundation of which if I fall, God now saves me.
Yeah.
And a lot of times when you're so caught up and when you're put into such a box, and even later, I had a conversation with my sister a few days ago, where I was raised Kojic Pentecostal, which is Kojic, it's Pentecostal holiness. It is hellfire and brimstone, period. But it doesn't leave for a lot of questioning. It doesn't leave for honest and truly you looking at yourself as a human and saying, why do I actually believe that? Okay, he preached that today, but did that really make sense?
Gotcha.
You know, it doesn't leave because it's like, God is all knowing, all powerful. I have to blindly trust this man, this figure. Not to say that God is not real, but which why now the younger people have such a hard time believing in God because they're like, yo, y'all crazy. Y'all believe in this thing that I can't even see. If God is so real, why didn't he save us from slavery? They're asking these questions now that are like jogging the older people because they have no answers because they've never sat with themselves and asked themselves that. And a lot of times it's so like, even in my life, it's like, no, this is what God says. This is the way God feels. So I have to feel that way. And I'm like, how in your human body can you say the way God feels? And it's like, they are not going to actually think and consider outside of their religion. It's like, God sent us here free will to choose everything we wanted to choose in this life. But all of a sudden, I commit to salvation and now I don't have any will no more. How does that make sense? For me, it doesn't really. It says I'm saved by grace. I confess with my mouth and believe in my heart. Does that automatically just fade away once I kind of go take a little puff of some little weed over here or something? No, that doesn't make my belief any different. But the way the other generations have been taught, it's just, oh, I'm not going out to the movie theaters because I'm sitting in the seat of the scornful. And it's just like those same ridiculous principles that honestly were used to enslave us as a people. Because they use the same Bible they use now to condemn me for actually purely loving my partner with all of my heart. No malice, no malicious love, nothing foul about the way I love that woman or the way she loves me. But now you're going to use what people put in the Bible within the last 60 or 70 years, dictate the way you treat your family, and you say that's God? And they don't want to even question it. Because imagine you question your whole life.
Sure.
You're questioning everything you believed in for 50 years. How destructive can that be on one human? Like, now I gotta really see myself? I gotta see myself that, oh, I really treated that person bad and I covered it up with religion. I was mean to that person. Oh, I really, really hurt that person's feelings, but I covered it up because God said so. Like, you're really, really having to question everything you've really ever done. And this for the sake of a God that you really, really haven't allowed him to be God.
You can pass the plate now.
You know, cash out DJ Fannie Mae if you want to pay me my offering. But I'm just saying, you know.
No, I get it.
Because it's one of those things that I've had to come to contact with. Because I was raised to be an apologist for Christ, to know how to defend my faith. And so with that, y'all taught me how to research. Your reason why now I can, on the other side of it, look at the same Bible and say, okay, let's look at history. Let's look at the actual Bible. Let's legitimately look at the facts and the history of everything. Sure. Let's look at these things. And now you're using these scriptures and all of this to condemn a people. And it's just like, imagine you just love people. What light and love you can bring into your heart. How whole your family could be.
No, I hear you. It makes me think about and again, regardless of who you are, what community you belong to, what you believe, it's this dynamic and this core question for me in belief, honestly, that we typically devalue others because we don't believe we're valuable ourselves. We typically want to shun others because we believe we've been shunned in some way. We want to alienate others because in some way I've been alienated. So it's like, what is that saying? Hurt people hurt people. Yeah. You know what I mean? And yeah. I really believe that that is a big part of just divisiveness at its core. Absolutely. It's like, no. Because you don't know where you're insecure.
If you don't have an identity outside of that, what are you left with? Mm-hmm. And that's what a lot of times people don't have. So it's just like, oh God, we once we discover that we're faced with these life altering, like, oh my God, look at me, how am I gonna come out? Like, it's just like automatically when you, I guess, assume, like when you walk into your fullness of your gayness or whatever, however you want to say it, it's just now like, oh, okay, I am this, but I'm also this. Yeah. You also automatically, it takes you out of just one thing. Because sure. If you're just a cisgender person, you live the same life in your own little corner of the world, you're never outside of this box. You never have to question these other boxes that you actually reside in. It's just like, I'm just this one way. And that's all that matters. And so it doesn't allow for space for someone to be as open as you are to ask questions. Because automatically the world says if you ask questions, you are. Sure. You know what I mean? So you gotta, like, those are things that, thankfully, I don't know, because I'm a queer woman or what, but I have these conversations a lot with straight men in particular. Women, a lot of times, they be trying to get with me. So, you know, I can't talk to them. No, I can't talk to them.
So real quick, and just kind of wrap things up, it's like, and again, I feel like this is a question that not only I may have, but am I off base to think that, and I'll speak specifically to you too, that even if I, in my caring for you two as human beings, in my advocating for, again, freedom, you know what I mean? While also, say, not wholly agreeing or understanding, is that off-putting to you? If it's like, I don't fully understand and maybe I don't agree, but that doesn't change the fact that I love and I care for you. Is that off-putting? Because a part of me feels like, and again, this is from far looking at people, that there seems to be a sense that people believe they can, again, like I said earlier, like they may not understand or agree, but as if that's coupled with being able to care or love people. So did that question make sense?
I mean, yes. I think for me, taking it back to our welcoming work, a lot of times when we think about immigrant communities or people from certain cultural backgrounds, we think of them as monolithic, right? And even those communities have perceptions of who African Americans are, for example, who Black folks are in America. And it's not until you make that space so for them to question where they're getting that from. Like when we think about being Latin Americans, for example, and colorism and what that means from our colonial heritage, right? And none of us had really had time to actually think about that and what we say or our sayings or things that we do and so it's not until we A, question ourselves, and B, spend time genuine and like very much intentional time with someone that we're able to go past the toleration piece, right? You have fear. Then you move into tolerance. Gotcha. You move into welcoming, then into belonging, right? And that doesn't mean that people have to shed any part of themselves, sure. But it does mean that you have to create space for new things and new ideas that you maybe haven't thought of. That's really what I think.
Absolutely, and that's kind of at the heart of it, is like, because I'm one that, again, and I think it's rooted in my value of myself, that this is, and again, very spiritual, is like, there's innate value in each and every human being. That's what I believe, you know what I mean? And if that be the case, does my choices change my value? Does anyone else's choices or difference in belief change that? I don't believe so. So regardless of what you believe, where you are in life, whatever, to me, that doesn't change the core way I see you and the fact that you possess value. So I don't know. Does that make sense in what I'm saying?
Yeah, but how does that? I mean, you asked about like understanding.
Mm-hmm.
You don't necessarily like agree or understand fully, but you gonna love me, and that's why he said it's a different. It's go tolerance and what you had
Welcoming, fear tolerance, belonging, right?
And belonging. So it's now, can I be your kid's Aunt Fanny? You know,
I believe you're already Aunt
but
Fanny.
that's what right.
Right.
Your daughter was like, "Are those really your teeth?"
Right, exactly.
You know, but I'm just saying that goes beyond the tolerance.
Sure.
Because then you have now gone away with, okay, if I bring Fanny and she brings her partner, if I explain this to my daughter, now I'm a bad parent, or I've gone against my belief as, you know what I mean? Like, it's a lot, you know, it's now like really how much would we, if you do love me and we're building a relationship, what type of relationship are we building? Sure. Can I invite you into my space and you feel fine and your kids be well?
Got you.
And are you now mature enough to have that conversations with your child? Because still there's always potential that your children could be. Sure. So one part, if one of your children was to, how would you feel and how would you treat them? And then two, when that conversation comes possibly with your children, how do you make them better than you were? And explain how to be a loving human.
Yeah. So the way mentally I've begun to navigate that, and this is something that, again, outside of the queer community or whatever belief, is something my wife and I have decided, and we knew it was a longer road of parenting, was actually teaching them to communicate as well as informing them. So with what you throw out, in my mind, it's the idea of, okay, yes, this is Auntie Fanny. Oh, you got questions? Let's talk about it and let me help you understand. Rather than, I think you spoke to it, rather than allowing fear to determine how we see people, how we treat people. So am I perfect at it? I ain't gonna speak for humanity, but I believe we're not the best at it. And I can speak for myself. I think, and again, I feel like in a lot of ways it's been ingrained in us. It's like fear and what that produces in us when it comes to engaging other people. So challenging that is very much a challenge. And I say this from a beliefs perspective when it comes to raising our children, what it looks like in practice, we shall see. But it's very much a thing of, okay, this is what we believe. I mean, even for us and even this conversation, like, how do we educate ourselves to even be able to do that well? You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So now you're raising, because, you know, before, like, you know, oh yeah, you know, whatchamacallit over there, her little child a little funny. And you just, everybody know that's why they ain't a family reunion no more, because they a little funny and they got to be over there. You know what I mean? And that's just that. And you don't talk about it.
Sure.
And so now I think that's just our charge now, is to be better than those they were before. Because if you want to take it back to now, oh, I'm black, when you go on this block, this is the white block. Keep your head down and just walk. Don't talk to nobody. Like that, having that conversation is still going to exist. Because hell, I hear it in black men. Okay, you got to have this conversation about how you handle yourself when you get pulled over. Conversations that you have with your kids always exist, but it has to go, like you say, that's a long road to parenting. I don't feel like that's a long road. That's the way it should be, because their minds are so malleable. The information that they soak up has always been a lot. That's how kids can know 4 or 5 languages by the time they're 6. They're sponges. So if you put whatever you put into that sponge is what they're going to absorb. And then that's going to lead to fear. But if you put informative, you treat them with love. You say, okay, they have a question. All right, let me sit you down, because a lot of times I know our parents were more so like, right.
This is what I said.
This is what I said. Because I said so. And it's like, you said so? Who are you?
But why you say so, though?
Right. And so as long as you're allowing for questions, because I think that even in our being adults, like, because we were raised with because I said so generation, we don't question a lot of things. But allowing ourselves to even question things and seek answers makes you better than you were yesterday.
And no one's perfect. Yeah. We all have our own issues, and there are issues within our communities that we have to address and work through. And all of these isms exist in different ways, in different forms, in different degrees in our communities. And it's not through conversations, right, that you're able to understand folks. And even, I had a conversation one time with one of my family members who's very supportive, but for the longest just was waiting for me to like dress like a woman would, because he was equating sexual orientation and gender identity as the same thing. And so we had to go into this conversation of like, okay, my sexual orientation is one thing, my gender identity is another. And it was like, what are you talking about? Like, and so we spent like an evening during, on the side of conversation in one of the family functions, just talking about, and it just opened up his entire idea of like, he just had this idea of like, if Daniel's gay, that means that he wants to wear women's clothing. And so I had to like, and there's nothing wrong if that was the case. Mm-hmm. But what I'm saying is that those two, sure. he was thinking of my gender identity and my sexual orientation as the same thing, and I had to sort of break it down. And that's another challenge that we have from other communities as well. Is like we always have to then explain things to folks, and it gets really tiresome sometimes. Mm-hmm. And you all, I'm not talking, I'm preaching to the choir here, but sometimes those conversations are important, and to folks who have that capacity, sometimes you don't have that emotional capacity to have those conversations because some folks have been really hurt and have a lot of trauma.
And it does, like that was what I was about to say, but you made that good point that you don't always have the capacity. But I think in times it does take you having discernment and knowing if that person genuinely wants to know.
Sure.
And each party has to be willing to listen.
Sure.
Because you can ask questions, and the moment we may challenge you, or may say something that's not necessarily that you like, now you get defensive and now we're going against each other. And what started off as you seeking understanding, because I kind of wrote, like it can't be. If you're really seeking understanding, both parties have to be willing to teach and learn. Mm-hmm. Because at the same time, I'm learning from you as a cis straight man, how to now talk to you all, how to now navigate your biases that you created in your mind. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And, I can, put my defenses down, because straight man can be very sometimes. But that creates, that teaches me too. So it's like, you're looking for just
Why
understanding.
Boxing the same?
Because you're boxed in. I'm not boxing you in. You boxed yourself in. God, what do you mean? So yeah, I just think that both parties, and that's something that in my life has been one of those things. I've heard, even like I said at the conference last week, people were like, I'm never coming back to that venue. I'm never doing this. And I'm like, for me, I'm going to stick with the venue. I'm going to talk to them, because if I'm doing something, I have to create, educate, and have the conversations to inform them. And after informing them, if they don't honor that, that is when you do. But I can't always just go off of emotion and Xing people out off of one thing. It has to be that all parties have to be willing to listen. And thankfully there is, and don't be afraid to speak up too. I think sometimes you're afraid that some things won't be received, and you may make people mad or upset, or they may not be ready for that conversation. And sometimes you're not, but you just hope that you say something. If you speak with love, I believe there's always going to be something in your heart that, even if you don't think about it that day, a couple moments later, or if you're in a situation, that is going to come back, and you'll be like, oh, that's what they meant. Mm-hmm. Oh, that is how I use that or implement that. So I think it's just like willing to be, to sometimes like sit down and have those conversations. Don't always have a chip on your shoulder because life has done you wrong, and life does us wrong, and it's hard for everyone. But I think, especially being the rural South, we got to be a little more patient. Because these people around here, their biases run deep and long. And you have the realization that a lot of their biases, whether it's color, gender, sexuality, their grandmother or their mother is a direct descendant of those strict, biases, Jim Crow South and things like that. So I think that's why the conversations have to be met with understanding, because already a lot of times you hear, oh, I know you were racist because your grandmother was. And sometimes it's not that they are, it's just like, bro, some of them are really, really ignorant because they have never had someone in their face that's different. Sure. If I'm South Park Susan, I don't leave South Park. And why should I? I have my grocery. No, South Park Susan was a real thing a couple years ago. She had called the police on a couple people in South Park.
The lady, yes, I remember that. Yep. Mm-hmm.
So imagine I'm South Park Susan. I never leave South Park. That is my silo. My kids go to school there, private school. My husband works a good job. He's out of town 3 weeks out of the month, probably scoring other women. But who cares? I live a great life. All my friends are white at the country club. Their husbands, oh, maybe there is a black girl over there, but her husband was a professional athlete, so they're excused from that. But they don't have to leave their silo. And so automatically, when you're met with their ignorance, you're like back at them, because now it's like, you should know better. But it's just like, bro, the girl ain't never been on a South Park but to go to the Panther Stadium. And that's the only time she ever sees a black person. Or she's at the grocery store and now I saw a black person. Or Spanish or Mexican. Like, sometimes, like, so you always have to keep in mind, you honestly don't even know their background either.
Sure.
So you can't always automatically, nobody can assume anything. And I think if we all leave the assumptions at the door, then we could all be better.
Yeah. That's good. And I hope this conversation, you felt welcomed. You felt as if you belong in this dynamic. And my ignorance hasn't rubbed you the wrong way, Fannie. If I need to apologize now, I apologize.
No.
Okay, I'm just playing with you.
I don't get offended that easily.
But no, I very much appreciate y'all and your perspective, and I'll even say your resilience in how you navigate, and your patience to be able to have these conversations. So thank you very much for that. But before we wrap up, I have gifts for both of you.
Oh my goodness.
So this is my Bridge Builder Motivational Journal.
I
signed it. Yeah. It's 52 weeks of quotes, reflection items, as well as action items. And this was created out of what I felt was a need to, and as we spoke about, it's like we're inundated, and we have been for years, with certain ways of thinking. What might happen if we spent just 1 year shifting how we think, shifting how we see ourselves, how we see others, and how we engage others. So,
well, thank you so much. I feel so honored to have a signed book by Dae-Lee. Oh my God.
I
you're very welcome.
really appreciate it. Thank you for the time. And
Absolutely.
thank you for creating spaces for folks to have these conversations. We're, following up on that sort of last comment, we're all always in different kinds of silos, and a lot of times technology and social media are easier avenues for us to learn more and to unsilo some of our work. And so your podcast, your videos, everything that you do helps get to folks who maybe haven't had a chance to have these conversations, to experience these conversations. And so thank you for making space, not just for this conversation, but so many other conversations that I know you've had that are so important to get out there to people who may not have had an opportunity to have those conversations.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.